The contrary, no. The ayes have it. I call on members' order of the day number 3.
Housing Corporation Affordable Housing Development Amendment Bill, first reading.
Mr Speaker.
Kelvin Davis.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Housing Corporation Affordable Housing Development Amendment Bill be now read a first time. I nominate the Social Services Committee to consider the bill. Mr Speaker, the population of New Zealand is 4.2 million, and I can guarantee that just about every single one of those 4.2 million people in New Zealand know that there is a housing crisis in New Zealand, except for 59 of them. There are 59 people in New Zealand who I know do not realise that there is a housing crisis in New Zealand.
Who's that?
And they all sit over there. Over there on the other side of the House. Mr Speaker, everyone else in New Zealand has seen the pictures on TV of people living in their cars, seen pictures on TV of children trying to do their homework by the interior light of vehicles. They've seen pictures of people living in tents on their relatives' back lawn. We've heard the stories about maraes having to open their doors to allow whole families to stay for a number of weeks because they have nowhere to live. All of New Zealand have seen those stories except for those people sitting on the other side of the House. When it comes to a plan to address housing, they've employed what I call the ostrich strategy, where they've put their heads in a hole in the sand and tried to pretend that things aren't happening around them. The trouble is, when you've got your head in a hole in the sand, the part that everyone can see is the posterior sticking up at you. And what we call that in Māori is whakapohane. When you show your backside to the people, it is a sign of contempt, and to me, that's what this national government is doing to the 41,000 homeless people in New Zealand, are just showing contempt for the situation, the predicament that they find themselves in. They are the party of see no evil, of hear no evil, of speak no evil. They don't want to see the problem that is staring them in the face. They don't want to go out and see the people down in Lambton Quay living in doorways. They don't want to see the people living in tents on their relatives' back lawn. They don't want to see the people down at the marae. They don't want to see no evil. They don't want to hear any evil. They don't want to hear what we're saying, that there is a crisis. Their modus operandi is deny, deny, deny. They don't want to speak any evil. They don't want to say the C word, crisis. They don't want to acknowledge that there is a housing crisis. So if you see no evil, if you hear no evil, if you speak no evil, in their minds, no evil exists. But let me tell you that a housing crisis does exist in New Zealand. Now, we know that we have a new Prime Minister and we know that he's no leader. But here, and he is a follower, and here's his chance to actually follow a plan from the Labour Party. And the architect of that plan is my learned colleague sitting to my right, Phil Twyford. It is a plan that will see 10,000 houses built every year for 10 years. All we've heard from the 59 people who see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil across the way is a mishmash, hodgepodge, patchwork of random thoughts and ideas that are going no way to addressing the issues of homelessness. And let's have a look at some of the stunts and stupidity. Bill English selling off state houses, taking $1.8 billion out of Housing New Zealand and blowing the budget and putting homeless families in motels. Nick Smith announcing he would build houses on land that turned out to be unsuitable for residential housing. I think there was a cemetery, I think there was a power station, a pump house or something.
Government House, Governor General's residence.
Governor General's residence. And you may think I'm joking, but that is the truth. John Key declaring there would be 65,000 social houses, but he's no plan and no money because all he wanted was a big number in a speech that he was delivering to a group. And then remember Paula Bennett's flying squads. They flew out and they couldn't see the problem. They failed to find the record number of families sleeping rough. They obviously didn't look hard enough. Then Bill English abolished the housing portfolio. Is there actually, I'm getting there, Mr. Speaker, is there actually a Minister for Housing? So what this bill does, Mr. Speaker, it's really, really simple, and the people across the way should take note. This bill amends the Housing Corporation Act of 1974 to increase the supply and affordability of housing and land by requiring the Minister of Housing to undertake an affordable house construction program that will build 10,000 affordable houses per year. Now, here are the two clinchers. Everyone should take note. The first part of the plan is the Minister must prepare a plan. Must prepare a plan to build 10,000 affordable houses. Here's the real clincher, and I think everyone should take out their pens and their notebooks. The second part of the plan is to implement the plan.
Get out of here.
Develop a plan such as Phil Twyford has developed, called Kiwi Build.
That's right.
Build the houses. That's all it takes. It's pretty simple. So the Minister of Housing must prepare a plan in consultation with the Corporation for the building of 10,000 affordable houses per year for first home buyers. Within 6 months of the completion of the plan required under subsection 1, the Minister must present a copy of the plan to the House of Representatives so we can all see what is in the plan. Then the Minister of Housing must ensure that all targets set out in the plan are met, and he must report to the House of Representatives annually on the progress. It's pretty simple. If you want to build houses, you've got to have a plan. And like I say, all we've seen is a mishmash, a hodgepodge, a patchwork of random ideas, and the situation hasn't improved. The second part of this bill is that the corporation will be responsible for managing the development of affordable housing under the plan, and this is what the plan means, that the Housing Corporation must ensure that the houses that are built are first of all affordable, because people have to actually be able to afford to buy them. We're talking about homeless people here, or people renting who need to be able to afford to buy houses. No, we're not talking about people who've already got 1 or 2 or 3 houses and they want more in their portfolio. The houses that are to be built must be sold to first home buyers. Those young people, and maybe some not so young people now, who don't have a house. These houses are not to be used for speculation. Pretty simple stuff. They must ensure, this is how the Housing Corporation must ensure that all the houses built must meet all legal standards required and are warm, dry and safe. It is a pretty simple plan, and this government over here needs to open their eyes, open their ears, and when we have the vote, open their mouths and say aye, that they will support this bill. See, in the last quarter, there were 2,500 houses built in Auckland. 2,500, and people say, wow, that's a lot of houses. The sad reality is, in Auckland alone, in the last quarter, they needed 4,000 houses to be built. So there's a shortfall of 1,500 houses. So let's extrapolate that over 6 months, 3,000 houses that we're falling behind in. Over a year, that's 6,000 houses that aren't being built, that need to be built, and that is just in Auckland alone. We're not talking about the rest of the country. As I've said, there are 41,000 homeless people in New Zealand. The most common complaint of constituents who come to my offices after they've had a moan about SIFs, the other most common complaint is about the lack of housing, and they want us to help them to get into homes. In fact, I saw a guy the other day in a backyard in West Auckland who's living in a tent, as I've said, living in a tent on his relative's lawn. That is unacceptable in 21st century New Zealand, that we have people these days who will never ever be able to afford a home to call their own. Imagine how soul-destroying that must be, knowing that you're going to raise your kids forever living in someone else's house. And that has got to stop. All it takes is for this government to support this bill. I commend it to the House, Mr. Speaker. Kia ora.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker.